Trump is facing assassination attempts. Israeli intelligence agencies just revealed this. So, do you know how many and how serious the threats to Trump's life are? This is the main topic Fang Wei is bringing you today. Also, the Gulf War seems to be bogged down, but regarding the oil issue or the Gulf War, it seems there's a way to resolve it. How should I put it? This is another interesting topic that I'm bringing to you today. All right, everyone, welcome to Good Morning America with Fang Wei. We're so glad to have you here. And a special hello to our YouTube audience joining us online. Hello to our listeners on Sound of Hope, Silicon Valley, FM 96.1. Okay, let's start with the latest news. Israel has provided Washington with the latest intelligence from its intelligence department. Iran is plotting a new plan to assassinate United States President Trump. President Trump spoke about this directly at the NATO summit in Turkey. Trump said, they want to get rid of the American leader, which is me. I've been put on some kind of list. This morning, I saw myself on all of their lists. Trump also said, we took out their first and second tier leaders. But I might be gone too, because I'm their #1 target. So when Trump went to Turkey for the NATO summit, he flew on a modified Boeing 747 gifted by Qatar, which is the new Air Force One. But after the summit in Turkey, during the first leg of the return trip from Ankara, the Turkish capital, to the Royal Air Force Base in the United Kingdom, called Mildenhall, during that leg, he didn't take the plane he arrived on. He switched to an old Boeing VC-25A that's been in service for over 30 years, which used to be Air Force One and was urgently dispatched. So this highlights that while attending the NATO summit in Ankara, he immediately faced safety issues regarding his life. It also highlights the reality of the threat to Trump's life. At the same time, I've reported to you twice that a pro-Iranian Revolutionary Guard channel released the name of the hotel where Trump stayed in Ankara and the floor he was on. And they threatened that Iranian missiles would directly attack Trump's delegation. Then, at the funeral for Khamenei that just ended in Iran, they publicly shouted to kill Trump, as you can see. We will kill Trump. They openly displayed several slogans like that. So this call from Iran to kill Trump isn't the first time. The earliest instance was back in 2020 when Trump ordered the strike that killed Soleimani, the top general of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Since then, high-level Iranian officials and state media have repeatedly vowed revenge, calling for Trump to pay in blood. So these public threats have recurred over the years, almost too many to count. But Iran isn't just talking. They are actually taking action. They just haven't succeeded. One example is in November 2024, when the United States Department of Justice indicted a man named Farhad Shakari, who was Afghan. Well, he came to the United States with his parents when he was young, so he grew up in America. At 21, he was sentenced to 14 years for robbery and was held until 2008 when he was deported. After being deported, he didn't go to Afghanistan, he went to Iran. Later, the intelligence department of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard sought him out. Why? First, because he grew up in the U.S. and understood American affairs. Second, he spent 14 years in prison, where he met American prison gangs. So, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard assigned him to plot the assassination of Trump, and he began preparations. However, halfway through, the Department of Justice foiled it. Now, this guy is still in Iran and hasn't been caught, but the network he built in the U.S. was arrested. The second one is a Pakistani man named Merchant, Asif Merchant. He's an agent specially trained by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and his mission was also to kill Trump to avenge the death of Soleimani. In April 2024, Merchant arrived in the U.S. with a Pakistani passport. His mission in the U.S. had 3 parts. One was to recruit hitmen to steal documents, organize protests, and thirdly, to carry out an assassination. 2 months later, in June, he met with the so-called hitmen he recruited in the U.S., but the other party was actually an undercover FBI agent. He even gave them $5,000 as a down payment for the hit. The following month, in July, he was arrested just before he was set to leave the U.S. after setting everything up. So the entire conspiracy was thwarted in advance. How did Trump respond to all this? Actually, Trump has faced 3 real assassination attempts now. The first was in Butler, Pennsylvania during the campaign. The second was at his golf course in Palm Beach, Florida. The third one was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which was a direct target. There have been 3 instances where a gunman actually got close to him. Regarding the threat from Iran, Trump said, "I'm on all their lists. I've been a bit lucky so far, but maybe that luck won't last forever." That's how Trump sees it. He's incredibly frank. Actually, those 3 attempts where they got close to Trump are just the ones people know about. There were 3 other times in 2016, before he took office in 2017, where they didn't get as close. Since Trump became president, through his terms up to now, there have been 5 other assassination or attack attempts that were foiled early on before they could get close. So if you add those to these 3, so with 3 in 2016, 3 real attempts where they got close, and 5 where they didn't, he's faced 11 assassination attempts from 2016 to now. After that assassination case at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Trump spoke very plainly. He said, "I've chosen the most dangerous profession in the world." But Trump himself, to use a Chinese expression, truly faces death with total calm. He said that these assassinations will only make his resolve even firmer, because he said, "I've studied assassination events, right? And my conclusion is that the most influential people, those who can get the most things done, are the targets of assassination." He gave examples like Abraham Lincoln, right? He said those who did the most things, they're the ones being hunted. He said, "I don't want to say I'm proud of it, but that's just the way it is." He said they won't go after those who haven't done much because they think that's just fine. Just don't bother those kinds of U.S. presidents who don't do anything. He also doesn't plan to back down because he's facing repeated threats, this backing down in public settings, this backing down. So actually, after the White House Correspondents' Dinner was over, right, he said at the time, don't interrupt, keep going, keep going. Later, under what the Secret Service called extremely intense pressure, the dinner was finally canceled. He said, "We originally wanted to stay tonight." So, of course, Trump's attitude has won high praise from many people who didn't agree with him before, right? To give 2 examples, one is Elon Musk. In the shooting in Butler, with the national flag as a backdrop, Trump raised his fist, blood on his face, right, shouting, "Fight, fight, 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 fight." That left a very deep impression on Elon Musk and Zuckerberg. Of course, the admiration for Trump, which then turned into support for him, certainly isn't limited to these 2 people. There are many others. So, of course, what everyone is most worried about now is that Trump has done so much and provoked so many, how should I put it, these so-called bad guys. So, can Trump himself survive? I, Fang Wei, will add my own comment here. I've made this comment before. It's an old saying, "Heaven helps the worthy," so he'll probably survive. That's my personal view. Right, but on the other hand, if Iran really persists, if this threat to the U.S. president isn't just shouting, but they actually take action, then the United States will have to cut out this tumor in advance. So Trump said, "Iran is a cancer. We must eradicate that cancer." That's what he said the day before yesterday. He said, "You know what to do with that cancer. You have to cut it out early." So this is indeed because Trump's stance on Iran is just that he doesn't want them to have nuclear weapons. He doesn't have any thoughts about regime change, no strong desire for it. But the current series of personal threats he's facing might just push Trump to consider starting a regime change to avoid endless future trouble. Okay, speaking of which, let's mention this. In the past 2 days, after the U.S. military hit 80 targets on July 7th, they hit 90 targets on July 8th, and then last night, another round of additional strikes was carried out. The goal still being to further weaken Iran's ability to attack merchant ships in the Strait of Hormuz. And this, at the same time, there's another piece of news. This is just a rumor. I can't confirm it. I'm just telling everyone, and I'll let you know in a couple of days if it's confirmed. In southern Iran, places called Bushehr, Bandar Abbas, Konarak, and Kerman. These cities were hit by heavy airstrikes after the U.S. military stopped its attacks. The U.S. military clearly stated it wasn't their planes. So one possibility is, well, there's only one possibility, which is that Middle Eastern countries have also started to take retaliatory action. Let's wait and see. Okay, in the past 24 hours, 13 merchant ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz, so ships are still passing through. Trump warned Iran that if you attack merchant ships in the Strait again, if it happens one more time, things will get much worse. How much worse? Would it be bad enough to cause the Iranian government to be completely overthrown? To go down that path? Okay, next let's talk about what the global energy production capacity is like right now. Let's put it this way. The war in the Strait of Hormuz has dragged on for about 4 or 5 months, right? From February 28th to now, March, April, May, June, right? 4.5 months. But time is not on Iran's side. Why? Because while Iran is blocking the strait, the world is continuously adapting. The world is solving the problem itself. What does that mean? 2 major changes. On one hand, oil production increases. Various countries are increasing oil production, although Gulf oil cannot be shipped out. First of all, non-OPEC countries, that is, oil-producing regions outside the Gulf, mainly from the Americas, from the United States, Canada, Brazil, Guyana, Argentina, and so on. So production increases, an extra 3.5 million barrels a day. Okay, OPEC itself is increasing production by 200,000 barrels. In addition, OPEC actually has a production capacity of 4.6 million barrels per day in spare capacity, which is intentionally kept in reserve, because if it's all extracted, it would cause oil prices to drop, right? It wouldn't be worth it. So they're holding back, but this is all OPEC's own potential. So 350 plus 460 is 8 million barrels. Now globally, the daily global oil demand is 100 million. So the increased production capacity here could be around 8 million barrels, which can completely solve the problem of oil not being able to be shipped out of the Strait of Hormuz. So actually, since the start of the war, global oil supply has rebounded significantly. In June, it increased by 4.1 million barrels per day. In 1 month, the total for that month the global total increased to 99 million barrels. And then there's another thing, which is oil transportation. When the Strait of Hormuz is choked off, there are 3 routes here in the Red Sea. The one on the left is the Yanbu port line, which is Saudi Arabia's Yanbu port next to the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries transport oil through the Saudi desert to the Red Sea coast, load it onto ships there, and head north through the Suez Canal to Europe, heading south through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait to Asia. Of course, the Houthis are right next to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, but the Houthis basically just shout and don't act, all talk and no action. They are in a self-preservation mode, because they feel that if they actually dared to block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait themselves, it would be like hitting a rock with an egg. Because no matter what, the Houthis are just a militia. Who is right, he's facing a crackdown by the Yemeni government forces, and to the north, he's facing a southern expedition by the Saudi government. Not a northern expedition, but a southern one. Plus, if the United States military is added to the mix, he feels like he won't even be able to survive. Not to mention that Iran isn't given any money now. Iran itself has no money. The Iranian military can't even pay its own troops, so how could they possibly support the Houthi rebels? It's like there's no benefit at all taking risks for Iran to block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. So even though Iran keeps saying they'll block both straits, that the Strait of Hormuz isn't enough, and they'll add another so-called nuclear option, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait is just talk. To block it, you'd need the Houthi rebels to do it. The Houthis were hit for over 40 days last year, bombed by the United States military for over 40 days. They're truly terrified now. So there's this oil pipeline that goes through Yanbu port where it's loaded onto ships for transport. Then the second one is outside the Gulf of Oman, which belongs to the United Arab Emirates. They have a port there, just outside the Strait of Hormuz. That port is called the Port of Fujairah. Now, this overland oil pipeline has already been completed. Basically, oil is being exported from there continuously, loaded onto ships at the Port of Fujairah. Another thing is the Strait of Hormuz itself. Right now, all the ships are following the Omani coastline. The narrowest part of the entire Strait of Hormuz is only 21 nautical miles wide. As you know, every country's, territorial sea jurisdiction is 12 nautical miles. This means that although the Strait of Hormuz is narrow, 9 nautical miles of it are not Iranian territorial waters. So now all the ships are hugging the southern end as they pass through, hugging the Gulf of Oman. A viewer even asked, if they're hugging the Gulf of Oman, how can Iran still attack them? Well, that's rogue logic for you. They say you have to sail on my side, and if you sail on my side, I'm going to charge you a fee. So if you stay far away, I'll use drones to attack you. So the reason those tankers were hit by drones and missiles is because they didn't follow the Iranian coastline. Regardless, being further from Iran and following the Omani coastline makes it hard for Iran to guarantee their aim. So there are more risks involved. Therefore, what I'm trying to say is that oil transportation is also seeking its own changes. Now, the key here is the following conclusion. Currently, global oil production is still 9,400,000 barrels lower than pre-war levels. By the end of this year, it will only be 3,700,000 barrels lower than at the end of last year. And the United States Department of Energy's intelligence agency estimated yesterday that the gap could be completely filled by early next year. In other words, even if the Strait of Hormuz remains congested, global energy supply, specifically crude oil supply, will have already reached pre-war levels. So you see, this is supply and demand. If one place gets stuck, the whole world starts moving. All oil-producing countries, including Tajikistan and Nigeria, are producing oil. So that's the situation. Now, even during wartime, as I just mentioned, 13 ships still pass through the Strait of Hormuz today. Yesterday, 22 ships passed through. Of course, during the MOU implementation period, it was 50 ships a day. And before the war, it was 120 ships. So that's why you see oil prices have stabilized today. They didn't keep soaring after that one-day spike. It jumped 8%, and then it pretty much stayed around that level. So, in a sense, since May, the U.S. military has assisted over 800 merchant ships and 380 million barrels of crude oil and successfully passing through the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, despite Iran's disruptions, the U.S. military is still working hard to help merchant ships and tankers cross the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, oil-producing countries worldwide are ramping up production, and Gulf nations are finding ways to use alternative routes to transport oil. Once these commercial adjustments reach a certain point, Iran will be sidelined, and the Strait of Hormuz will lose its significance. It won't be able to hold the world by the throat forever. Eventually, the world will find other places to breathe. They won't need to breathe through there anymore. It won't be a throat they're holding. At that point, Iran will truly be finished, pushed into a corner of the world, just getting poorer day by day. That's the situation. Well, I should mention something about U.S. oil prices. With so much production, why can't the U.S. push prices down itself? This is actually a business and management issue. I'll cover it in Fang Wei Finance. I haven't finished the script yet, but I'll make a show. Fang Wei Finance has already released 7 or 8 episodes on key economic topics, so you can subscribe there. After Fang Wei time, go to Fang Wei Finance. Important things are worth repeating. Fang Wei Finance. Fang Wei Finance? Fang Wei Finance. Okay, go there, and in a few days, I'll explain why U.S. oil prices won't be very low. Or there's a second question. Regarding oil prices during this Gulf conflict, some predicted they'd definitely hit $100, or even $300. But we saw that didn't happen, right? It peaked at over $90 and is now back to the 70s. Why? Trump made many moves behind the scenes that we don't know about. Many people are unaware. So Fang Wei Finance has a special program on this. All right, feel free to subscribe. Next, let's talk about another shift. Turkey. You know, Turkey spans both Europe and Asia. It often plays both sides. Even though it's a NATO member, it often tries to please Russia. But recently, it made a big move, a shocking U-turn in defense policy. Turkey abandoned the Russian-made S-400 missile system to buy American F-35 stealth fighters. What's the deal? Well, this was a major change at the NATO summit in Ankara. One is that Ukraine can build American Patriot missiles, and second, the U.S. is willing to provide F-35 stealth fighters. The F-35 is the most advanced U.S. stealth fighter after the F-22, but it's available for export. They never sold it to Turkey before, but now Trump says, okay, we can sell it to you. Why? I'll tell you why. The history goes back 10 years to 2017, when the United States Congress passed a bill called the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. What does it mean? It means any country that makes major military purchases from Russia's defense and intelligence sectors will face United States sanctions. And in that very year, Turkey, which often plays both sides, signed a $2.5 billion arms deal with Russia to buy the Russian-made S-400 air defense system. Well, 2 years later, the Trump administration strictly followed this law passed by Congress and kicked Turkey out of the F-35 fighter jet procurement program, essentially banning them from buying it. At the same time, what was the reason for this? The reason was because the United States was facing a core risk, which is that the S-400 and the F-35 absolutely cannot coexist. The key here is technical security, because the S-400's radar is specifically designed to detect, track, and analyze aircraft. And the Pentagon's biggest concern was that if Turkey had both the Spear and the Shield, they would use the S-400 to test the American-made F-35, using them together. This would allow the S-400 to collect valuable data on the F-35 stealth fighter, including top-secret info like radar signatures, to crack the stealth advantage of America's most advanced fighter. So the United States insisted that if you have the S-400, don't even think about the F-35. So this matter has been at a standoff for 7 years now. And now, because of this, Turkey also became the first NATO ally to be sanctioned by the United States. It's a NATO ally, Turkey is, but it was sanctioned by the United States. No politeness there. If you buy Russian, that's the result. But just the other day, Trump announced at the NATO summit that he would lift the sanctions on Turkey and consider selling them the F-35. What's the reason? The reason is that Turkey decided we don't want the S-400 anymore. As for the ones they already have, they'll sell them to other Gulf countries, supposedly to the United Arab Emirates or something like that. Who knows if they'll actually sell them? Anyway, it's just an excuse to make it sound a bit better. So why did Turkey make such a big change? In my view, it's simple. They realized Russian weapons just aren't up to the task. They can't compare to United States weapons at all, just like the CCP's weapons. After the 2 wars in Venezuela and Iran, the true colors of Russian and CCP weapons have been fully exposed, and it'll be hard to sell them on the international market from now on. Because in the end, strength speaks for itself. If you face the U.S. military and can't show power, how can you compete? Strength matters. Turkey dropped Russian weapons and now leans toward the U.S. This is a major shift. Next, the following move is also worth mentioning. Washington will host an international meeting next Thursday, July 16th, an international foreign ministers meeting. Secretary of State Pompeo has invited more than 60 countries from around the world. So these foreign minister level officials, why are they coming to Washington? To discuss what's called global transnational far-left terrorism. Transnational far-left terrorism. So it's really quite a major event. Now, the State Department spokesperson, in response to media requests, said this. He said, violent far-left. Political terrorism is resurging, along with strong transnational links. And new forms of aggregation are making a comeback, because this threat has never been fully addressed in the past. Therefore, every one of our exchanges are designations of terrorist organizations on the list and our security assistance. Will have a cumulative effect, supporting countermeasures within various countries and abroad. This spokesperson, named Piggott, said our actions target violent activities that fit the definition of violent terrorism, including assassinations, kidnappings, violent threats against United States facilities and law enforcement, as well as attacks on critical infrastructure, military personnel, and civilians. All right, so basically, what is this all about? As you know, since President Trump began his second term, he has already designated dozens of domestic groups as foreign terrorist organizations. And who is the biggest target among them? It's Antifa. This so-called American far left, I'll call them a paramilitary wing. This Antifa actually originated in the 1920s and was once a violent wing used by the German Communist Party to strike at political opponents. Or you could say the German Communist Party's paramilitary squad. That's what it means. And Antifa, they're used to labeling the other side as fascists. And then they can just start a fight. That's the situation. So basically, the United States is now calling over 60 countries together to say, we've banned Antifa and you all have to ban him too. That's the idea. Everyone working together to wipe out Antifa worldwide. What's the biggest takeaway here? Well, I think, for one thing, this struggle between the left and right is, in many countries, an internal conflict of values. The United States wants to make Antifa illegal, but how many other countries will follow suit? We don't know. Only very traditional countries might define it that way. But regardless, Rubio is still going to invite over 60 countries. That's the first point. It's the courage the United States is showing and how it handles things now, based on its own principles. And its execution and decisiveness are I think, quite remarkable. That's the first point. Second point. Do you see? The United States is moving away from the United Nations, doing things on its own, and demonstrating, or rather proving, American leadership. This meeting will be on July 16th, so he invited over 60 countries, right? We'll see how many show up. If over 50 countries actually come, it'll show that American leadership is very strong.